this case isn't really about a DUI. It's about entitlement colliding head-on with the rule of law and a young man who believed his father's badge made him untouchable. Spoiler, courtrooms don't work that way.
The most privileged young man I ever encountered entered my courtroom on a Tuesday morning and declared that I had no authority. His name was Sheriff Martinez, 21 years old, son of County Sheriff Roberto Martinez. By the time he left 15 minutes later, he understood precisely what genuine authority represents. It began with a DUI arrest that should have been uncomplicated. Saturday night, around 11 p.m., Derek collided his pickup truck into Mrs. Henderson's mailbox on Maple Street, a peaceful residential neighborhood where families sleep with windows open and children ride bicycles on sidewalks. He was traveling 40 miles per hour in a 25 zone when he lost control and struck the brick mailbox head-on, completely destroying it and nearly hitting a fire hydrant. When patrol officers arrived, Derek was wandering around the crash site, smelling strongly of alcohol, speaking unclearly, and unable to walk in a straight line, regardless of the consequences. Blood alcohol testing revealed 0.12, significantly above the 0.08 legal limit. Straightforward DUI case, correct?
A 0.12 BAC isn't borderline, it's solidly over the limit. Legally, this is textbook DUI. No gray area, no judgment call. But when power and privilege enter the picture, even simple cases can turn explosive.
It should have been routine booking, court appearance, and standard penalties. However, nothing involving the Martinez family was ever routine. Here's where it becomes intriguing. The arresting officer, Sergeant Williams, with 15 years of service, an unblemished record, and never having received a corruption complaint, attempted to process Derek normally. Standard procedure: handcuffs, Miranda rights, transport to county jail for booking. That's when Derek began making phone calls. Not to an attorney, not to his mother, not even to a friend for bail money. No. He contacted his father directly, Sheriff Roberto Martinez. Dad, Derek spoke into his phone while seated in the patrol car. These officers arrested me. Fix this, now. Within 20 minutes, Sheriff Martinez appeared at the scene, not in civilian clothing like a concerned father, but in full uniform, badge clearly displayed, acting as if he was there officially rather than personally. This is a private matter, Sheriff Martinez informed Sergeant Williams, his voice carrying the authority law enforcement officers use when expecting immediate compliance. My son made a mistake tonight, consumed too much alcohol, but we'll handle this privately. No need for charges, no need for paperwork. I'll ensure he gets home safely and addresses the consequences. No need for charges, for a DUI, for property damage, for reckless endangerment, because it's a private matter and the sheriff declares it.
So, let's be clear, this is no longer about Derek. When a sheriff threatens an officer to drop charges, that's obstruction of justice, abuse of authority, and intimidation. These aren't policy violations, they're felonies.
Sergeant Williams, an experienced officer with 15 years and unwavering integrity, patiently explained that drunk driving isn't a family matter, it's a public safety matter. That Mrs. Henderson's destroyed mailbox isn't a private issue. That Derek's blood alcohol level of 0.12 isn't something resolved through family discussion. With respect, Sheriff, Williams stated, your son committed multiple violations tonight. I must process these charges according to department policy. That's when Sheriff Martinez removed the pretense and became aggressive. He moved closer to Williams, using his height and position for intimidation. Sergeant Williams, he said, voice becoming firmer, you work for this county. I oversee this county. My son leaves here tonight without charges, or you'll be directing traffic at school crossings in the morning. Is that clear? Direct threat. Using official position to obstruct justice. Attempting to interfere with a legitimate arrest. All felonies, by the way. But Sheriff Martinez assumed his badge made him immune. However, Sergeant Williams didn't retreat, didn't hesitate. Don't allow corruption to succeed simply because it wears a uniform. He filed the charges anyway, followed proper procedure, documented everything, including the sheriff's attempted interference. Because that's what good officers do when they witness the system attempting to protect itself instead of serving justice. The next morning, I was at my desk by 8:15, reviewing the night's arrests while enjoying Christina's strong Italian coffee. Derek Martinez's case file sat on top, and it was thicker than usual for a simple DUI. That's when I noticed Sergeant Williams's supplemental report about Sheriff Martinez's interference. I've known Roberto Martinez for years. Good officer mostly. Served the community well. Maintained low crime rates. Led a professional department. However, success sometimes influences people, making them believe rules apply to others. Possessing authority doesn't create corruption, but it certainly reveals whether corruption was present all along. 9:30 a.m. sharp, Derek Martinez entered my courtroom as if arriving at a country club. Designer jeans, expensive sneakers, leather jacket that likely cost more than most people's monthly rent. But it wasn't the clothing that concerned me. It was the attitude, the confidence, the smirk, suggesting he knew something I didn't. His father wasn't with him, probably realizing his presence might draw unwanted attention after last night's interference. Smart move, actually, but it wouldn't save his son from facing consequences. Derek Martinez, Christina announced from her desk, her voice carrying clearly through the courtroom. Driving under the influence, property damage, reckless driving, and resisting arrest. He walked to my bench, and I could already sense the attitude radiating from him. Not worried like most DUI defendants. Not respectful like people who understand they broke serious laws. Not embarrassed like young people who made dangerous mistakes. Simply annoyed that he had to be there, like this was some clerical error that would resolve once people understood who he was. Mr. Martinez, I began, reviewing his criminal record and incident reports. You're charged with operating a vehicle while intoxicated with a blood alcohol level of 0.12, property damage, and reckless driving. Do you understand these charges? Yes, I understand them, he replied, speaking as if bored by conversation with his high school principal. But I believe we need to clarify something here before proceeding further. Clarify something. The phrase privileged people use when they believe their connections override the law. What requires clarification, Mr. Martinez? Look, Judge, he said, leaning casually against the defendant's table, as if relaxing at a bar. I know my dad already discussed this situation with people. This entire situation is simply a significant misunderstanding that became exaggerated. A misunderstanding. Drunk driving is a misunderstanding. Destroying someone's property is a misunderstanding. Endangering an entire neighborhood is a misunderstanding. Mr. Martinez, your blood alcohol was 0.12, well above the legal limit. You crashed into Mrs. Henderson's mailbox while traveling 40 miles per hour in a 25 zone. Which part of that is a misunderstanding? The part where I get arrested and dragged through court like some ordinary criminal, he replied sharply, his voice becoming more aggressive. Do you know who my father is, Judge? There it is, the magic phrase.
There it is, the most dangerous sentence in any courtroom. When someone says this, they're not asking a question. They're issuing a threat disguised as confidence. And judges hear it as a direct challenge to the law itself.
Privileged people believe solves all their problems. Yes, Mr. Martinez, I know who your father is. Do you know who I am? You're a municipal judge, he said with a dismissive shrug. Local level matters. traffic tickets, small claims, minor violations. My dad oversees the entire county sheriff's department. Different levels, you know? Different levels. Local level matters. Like municipal court is somehow beneath county law enforcement. Like judges are minor officials compared to sheriffs. This young man had no understanding of how government operates, how checks and balances function, how separation of powers protects democracy. Mr. Martinez, I said, maintaining a level but firm voice, in this courtroom, I decide what happens to people who break the law. That includes drunk drivers who happen to be related to law enforcement. That's when he laughed, actually laughed at me, as if I had told him the funniest joke he had ever heard. He threw his head back, ensuring everyone in the courtroom could see his amusement at my ignorance. Judge, he said through his laughter, with all due respect, you're completely without authority here. You believe you make decisions? You believe you control outcomes? My dad controls all the police, all the arrests, all the evidence, all the enforcement. Without his cooperation, you can't do anything to anyone. You're simply a person in robes pretending to possess authority.
Here's the constitutional lesson Derek never learned. Police enforce laws, but judges interpret and apply them. Sheriffs don't outrank courts. Badges don't override gavels. In a democracy, judicial authority is the final word.
Without authority. This privileged young man had just told a sitting judge he had no authority because his father wore a badge. He had declared that law enforcement families are immune from judicial authority, that sheriffs outrank judges, that corruption trumps justice as long as it comes with a uniform. The courtroom became completely silent. Everyone, other defendants waiting for their cases, court officers, bail bondsmen, even Christina, stared at this young man who had just declared that judges have no authority over sheriffs' families. You could sense the shock in the air, the collective reaction from people who understood they had just witnessed something unprecedented. Mr. Martinez, I said, standing from my bench slowly, deliberately, allowing the weight of the moment to settle on everyone present. Did you just tell me I have no authority? I'm simply stating facts, he replied with that same arrogant smirk, that complete confidence of someone who has never faced real consequences. You need evidence to convict people, correct? My dad controls the evidence. You need police cooperation for enforcement? My dad controls the police. You need jail space for sentences. My dad oversees the jail. So yes, when it comes to my family, you're essentially without authority. That's simply reality. He actually believed the justice system was some kind of game where his father held all the cards, that sheriffs are above judges, that law enforcement families are immune from consequences, that badges create a separate class of citizenship with special privileges and protections. Behind Derek, I could see other defendants watching this exchange with amazement. Working people mostly, folks who had never imagined telling a judge he was without authority. People who understood that showing respect in a courtroom isn't optional, that challenging judicial authority is like challenging gravity. It might feel satisfying for a moment, but the landing will be painful. Mr. Martinez, I continued, my voice carrying clearly through the silent courtroom, you seem to have a fundamental misunderstanding about how the justice system operates in America. I understand perfectly, he said, crossing his arms like a petulant teenager. Power protects power. Money protects money. Badges protect badges. My dad has real authority. Weapons, badges, jail cells, the ability to make people's lives very difficult. You simply have robes and a wooden hammer. Simply robes and a gavel. This young man believed judicial authority was costume jewelry compared to his father's badge. He viewed democracy as a hierarchy, with law enforcement at the top and judges somewhere below, taking orders instead of giving them. Mr. Martinez, let me show you what real authority looks like in a democracy. I sentenced him to the maximum penalty for first offense DUI, 6 months license suspension, $1,000 fine, 40 hours community service, mandatory alcohol education, and 60 days in county jail with work release. His smirk disappeared immediately. What? You can't do that. I just did. Bailiff, please take Mr. Martinez into custody. Wait, he shouted as Officer Rodriguez approached with handcuffs. My father won't allow this. Your father has no authority in my courtroom. He'll have you removed. He'll ensure you never work again. Mr. Martinez, threatening a judge is contempt of court. That's an additional 30 days. As they cuffed him and read his Miranda rights, Derek continued yelling about his father, about how this wouldn't stand, about how I didn't understand who I was dealing with. But here's the beautiful thing about justice. It doesn't care who your father is. 2 hours later, Sheriff Martinez called. Judge, I need to discuss my son's situation. Sheriff, your son was sentenced according to law. There's nothing to discuss. Judge, Derek is a good young man who made one bad decision. Surely we can work something out. Sheriff, the law doesn't make exceptions for law enforcement families. Judge, I've served this community for 25 years. I believe that earns some consideration. Sheriff, your service is commendable. However, it doesn't purchase immunity for your son. Long pause. When he spoke again, his voice was colder. Judge, I control all law enforcement in this county. Without my cooperation, your courtroom becomes without authority. Now, the sheriff was threatening me as well. Sheriff, are you threatening this court? I'm explaining reality. Sheriff Martinez, if you interfere with your son's sentence, I'll hold you in contempt and have you arrested by state police. I hung up and called the state attorney general's office. Within an hour, 2 state investigators were taking my statement about attempted interference. The real test came that evening. Derek was supposed to report to county jail for his first night. The 8 p.m. deadline came and passed. No Derek. I called the jail directly. Sheriff Martinez had been there all evening, actively preventing his son from serving his sentence. I called state police. This is Judge Caprio. I need a warrant executed for failure to report. Within 30 minutes, state troopers arrested Derek at a party, still drinking, celebrating his father's protection. They transported him to state holding, bypassing county jail entirely. Next morning, Derek was back in my courtroom in orange jumpsuit and handcuffs. His arrogance was gone. Mr. Martinez, you failed to report for sentencing. That's a violation. Your Honor, there was confusion. Mr. Martinez, 8 p.m. is not confusing. Your father preventing you from serving is obstruction of justice. Your Honor, I want to apologize. Mr. Martinez, for failure to report, I'm adding 90 days to your sentence. For your father's interference, I'm referring this to the State Attorney General for investigation. Derek's face went pale. You're going to have my father arrested? Your father attempted to obstruct justice. That's a felony.
This is real accountability. The son learned that arrogance has consequences. The father learned that authority without restraint becomes corruption. And the system proved something powerful: justice doesn't care who your dad is,
regardless of what badge he wears. 2 weeks later, Sheriff Roberto Martinez was arrested by state investigators. Derek served his full sentence in state custody with no special treatment. 6 months after his release, Derek returned to speak at a program for young offenders. Your Honor, he said, I want to tell these young people what I learned about real authority. I believed my dad's badge made me untouchable. I thought judges were without authority compared to law enforcement. I was completely wrong. He turned to the teenagers. Real authority isn't about who you know. Real authority is accountability. This judge taught me that nobody is above the law. Derek completed college, became a counselor. His father served 18 months in federal prison and lost his position as sheriff. The new sheriff, Captain Rodriguez, stopped by my chambers. Judge, the Martinez case changed everything in our department. When Derek told you that you were without authority, what did you think? I thought about every citizen who's been told connections matter more than law. I decided to prove them wrong. Real authority isn't about badges or weapons. Real authority is ensuring justice applies equally to everyone. Derek Martinez learned that judicial authority isn't costume jewelry. It's the foundation of democracy itself. His father learned that wearing a badge doesn't place you above the law. My father used to say, "Frank, authority without accountability is simply tyranny." The Martinez family learned that lesson the hard way. I'm Frank Caprio. Remember, in America, the law is the ultimate authority, and nobody is above it. Thanks for listening, and God bless.